Blob storage offers three different access tiers: Hot, Cool, Archive. Hot offers a very cheap read and write operations compared to a costly storage option. It is always recommended to use the hot access tier for your this storage account if your application is reading the data very frequently. Next is the cool access tier. Compared to the hot access tier, cool offers cheaper storage cost but the costly read and write cost. So if your application has a requirement to store the data more than 30 days and less read and write operations or in less frequent use of accessing the data, it is recommended to use the cool access tier. Next and the last one is the archive access tier. It's cheaper to store compared to both hot and cool but costly to perform the read and write operation. It is recommended if your application is storing the data for more than 180 days with less frequent uses. Once you store the data on the archival access tier, you won't be able to read the data until unless you rehydrate the data. So first of all, you need to rehydrate the data before you use it. When you move from one access tier to another access tier, then you need to pay for the transaction charges. When you move from hot to cool, then you pay for write charges. When you move from cool to hot, then you need to pay for the read charges. So you need to be very careful while moving the storage account tier. You can move the containers or the storage account from hot to cool, but you cannot move it to the archival storage. Whereas if you have the container, the blob storage, then you can move the blob storage type to hot to cool and the archival as well. We'll go to the details in the demonstration. Let's look at the demo now. Till now, we'll go and create a storage account. Let's go to the create resource, create storage account. You can find the storage account here as well, or if you want, you can type the storage account and then you will have the storage account as a search result. When you create a storage account, it asks you to select the source group as usual, then the name of the storage account. Storage account is publicly available service which will be hosted as a public endpoint on a public DNS server. So you are expected to provide a unique name for your storage account between 3 to 24 characters, and all should be in small character. So let's say sample demo storage. Let's hope this is available. Yeah, it is available. So if you see, if I type any caps lock, then it will give me an error. Just for the demonstration, I'll switch it back. Here is the location which we have seen in our previous demo. Depending upon the preference of your region, choose the appropriate location. I'm going to leave it as is, and then type of storage account. If you are planning to deploy the storage account for the production, it is recommended to use for the premium version. For this demonstration, I'm going to keep the storage account as a standard. As we have discussed, the storage account will have multiple storage kind: general purpose V2, V1, and the blob storage. General purpose V2 is the latest version of the storage account which offers all the type of services. So it is recommended to use the general purpose V2 until unless you have any specific set of requirement to choose the other version. Now let's look at the other option as in replication. Once I go to the replication, I have certain options available based on the location which I have chosen. For example, the replication type I have is local redundant, geo redundant, and read only GA redundant. So depending upon your location, this particular selection criteria will change. So I will go and check the details here in this section. If I go and change the location from UK West, UK South, or UK West to the West Europe, then I get more options. Like I got the zone redundant, geo zone redundant. What is these replication options are? So basically, redundancy is one of the best feature of the storage account. As we have discussed in one of our section about the locations, geography, and the data center, when we create the store the data onto the data storage, and by default the data is copied into three different copy in the synchronous fashion onto the same physical location on the same data center. But this is not going to be helpful in case of a mission critical application, or from the application which is expecting the high availability, because if there is something happen to that particular storage location or the data center, then your data will be lost. So if you have an application which can generate the data which you are storing on the storage account, there is no harm to choose the local storage LRS storage option. But if you have the application data which is critical and which cannot be regenerated or recovered, then you need to think about your storing policy, data storage policy. You need to think, what if the data is going to be lost? What will happen in case of a disaster recovery scenario? So in such cases, what Microsoft has given, it has given number of options. So very first and the default option is the LRS option. So as per the LRS, the data is copied onto the same physical location, but the data has three synchronous copy on the same data center. When you go to the zone redundant, which is the next level, you get the availability zone options, like you get the availability zone in virtual machines. We'll go to the virtual machines in some of our future videos. So zone is basically collection of data centers, one or more data center. So when you go for the zone option, what it happens is the data which you are storing onto the storage account, it gets copied to three different data centers, three copies of your data onto the three different data centers, or basically three zones. When you go for LRS, it copies to three data center, but when you go for the zone redundant, it copies the data to three different zones. Now the question comes is it good enough to choose this kind of a replication? If yes, then why do we have the other options available? Well, in this case, this is going to be help you to protect in case of a data center failure. But what if the entire region gets failed? How do you recover your data if the entire region is going to be failed? So what would be the use case for the geo-redundant? So geo-redundant, as the name says, it is the geographically data redundancy for your data which you are storing on the storage account. In such cases, the data is going to be stored onto three different geographical location in the data center, or three different region which is onto three different geography. Now, one thing to remember here is, if while choosing the geo redundant, you need to make sure that your business is allowing your data to store from one geography to another one. If you are using any government data or any data which is not allowed to store across your country boundaries or across any specific region, then you need to be very careful while choosing the geo-redundant. That's what the recommendation is given by the Microsoft. Next is the read access geo-redundant, wherein you would be able to read the data even in case of a disaster happens. In case of in a particular region, you would be able to read the data from the secondary region, which will store the data. So let's say if there is a failure happens by the Microsoft, or you perform a manual failure, then you would be able to switch back from the primary location to the secondary location, and you would be able to read the data in case of RAGRS. I hope this is helpful, and based on the requirement and the kind of a data you are storing for your application, for your business, you need to be very careful. How do you manage your data access policies? How do you tackle care of any disaster scenario? So while having the disaster recovery scenario, you need to be very careful. How do you manage the data and what data is going to be lost? All the information regarding the loss of data you will find on the Microsoft website. So I will recommend, if you're performing and or if you're architecting any application and which requires the high availability of your data, or which is being stored on the storage account, I will highly recommend you to go to the Microsoft website and check the latest policies available. If there are any changes, please revisit by the time you are looking at those. Now let's go and click on the next button, what it is asking for. So here we have the connectivity methods. First method is public endpoint to all network. What does it mean? It means that your storage account is not bound to any specific network. It means anyone who has the storage access or the connection string key of the storage account, that particular request or a calling person or calling request would be able to access your storage account data. It doesn't mean that your data is unprotected or unsecure, because until and unless somebody is going to have the storage access key, you won't be able to, retrieve the data or pass on the information to the calling person, to calling request. So when it says publicly, nothing to afraid. Publicly it means even though it is publicly, but in order to authenticate, they need to pass on the storage access key. I will tell you what is the storage access key and where do you find that. Next is the public endpoint on a public selected network. So let's say you have multiple parts, virtual private network and the storage account, and you want to control your storage account data to be accessed from a specific set of virtual networks or a subnet within the virtual network, virtual private network. Then you have an option to choose here, that choose a virtual network. At the moment I don't have it, but if you have a virtual network, you have a freedom to choose a virtual network. Once you choose the virtual network, it will ask you to choose the subnet as well. So here you have an option to choose and make sure your data is only being accessed via the virtual network as well. So like we have discussed in one of our serverless programming video, if you are going to protect your storage account to a specific virtual network, then the publicly available service such as in Logic app, they won't be able to access the storage account until unless you specify the outbound IP address range of the storage account here into the IP address range settings. I will tell you where exactly you find all those IP address range settings which you can specify. So basically what I'm saying is, if you tightly couple your storage account to allow access from a certain virtual network or subnet, then you need to be very careful that you are not trying to access the storage account from outside of the network, such as in Logic app. which runs on the publicly available service but from the Microsoft managed IP addresses. I hope you are getting it to what I'm trying to explain here. But this is what the scenarios I've gone through, and we struggle a lot when we design such a scenario where the client has a requirement to manage the storage account or keep it in storage account in a private bond, and on the other hand they are expecting a logic app to access the data storage. So kind of a difficult situation, a deadlock, and then we need to uh, adjust somewhere what to do and what not to do, kind of things. But now if your client has a concern, then and they are really willing to access the logic app, they have another option to choose for the go for the IAC in the logic app, which is another topic. We'll discuss it sometime later. Next is the routing preference. Yes, you can define the internet routing as well. For now, I am going to leave the connectivity method to as is, and then you also have the private endpoint. As I said, you can specify a specific subscription, DNS zone, subnet, and basically VNet to VNet peering kind of scenario. You can specify from where your storage account would be allowed to retrieve or to serve the data from the calling service. So that's the scenario. Next, let's move on the data protection thing. Uh, Very often you have found that you are storing some of the critical data of your storage account, such as, and let's say you are storing the hard disk or virtual hard disk for your virtual machine onto the storage account, and somehow due to some mistake you often found that the container of the storage account is deleted and you're not able to retrieve it. Earlier you used to call to the Microsoft support, and they used to take some amount of time to return your data back and all those things. But now Microsoft has given you a feature called the turn on soft delete, wherein you can use this particular feature. So even though if you have deleted your data from your storage account, then you have option to get back the data with the soft delete option. So you have certain data which is going to be keep, but how many days the data is going to keep, there is some setting for that. You need to be very careful about that. It's not going to be keep for forever. So that is something you should be checking out as well. Again, it has a turn on the soft delete option for the file share as well. If you want to specific for file share in the blob storage, so you can do that as well. I'm not going to make these settings for this particular demonstration because we don't have any such requirement for now. Now you have the other options called the secure transfer, which is by default is enabled, and I do not recommend you to change the settings until unless you have any specific requirement for that to make it disabled, to be honest. Large file share is by default disabled, but you can enable that if you have any specific requirement for that. Data lake, by default it is disabled, but if you're using the data lake, which we'll discuss in one of our future videos, so data lakes you can enable it from here. So for now, let's create I don't want to create any tags. If you want, you can go ahead and create tags. It is just the annotation you're providing for your resources in Azure. So if you want to create any reporting out of it using those tags, you'll be able to create it. So that is again a really good feature. We'll discuss it sometime later about the taggings. Let's wait for the storage account. This should be very quick and fast. It doesn't take much of a time, so hopefully it should be available. As I said, the storage account is ready. Let me walk you through about this storage account on the portal. So if you're new onto the storage account, you have the options about all the properties which we have described just now. The resource group, the status which says it is primary, it is available. Let's say if it is going to switch to a secondary reason due to some failure or some disaster, then the status it will show it is displaying it from the secondary region, something like that. So you will have the status right away from here, from the storage account dashboard. And it's showing this access tier, replication, storage kind, which is v2, which I have selected, subscription. If I want, I can change as well. Then the access log, which I can see what different type of operation it has performed. Then if I want to give a read write operation access to some resources, some services, some user group in the Active Directory or some service principal, I can go ahead and manage the control of the access from the access control management service, which you will find in almost all the Azure services here. So for a storage account, just to let you know, a storage account has the specific set of roles to perform the read and write operation. For example, for a storage account, I will find the, even though you give the contributor access, earlier the contributor, when you give the contributor access earlier, most of the services used to get an option to perform the read and write operation. But one thing to mention here, in case of the storage account, you need to specify specific type of contributor access, what level of operation you are trying to perform. So that operation type of contributor access you need to give. For example, the storage account, you need to give the data contributor access if you are willing to have the access type of reading and writing the information from a blob storage. Similarly, it goes for the file and queue storage as well. So remember, if somebody is trying to ask you to give me access so that I can read and write or download and upload the file to the storage account, whether it is programmatically or from the storage explorer. So you need to be very careful that even though you give the access as in contributor access, it's not going to work. You need to be careful and give the access as in storage contributor. So do remember that. Let's move on. Tags. Again, if you have any problems with the storage account connectivities or anything like that, you'll find all the issues over here. So this is again a data transfer, which is a kind of a new feature. So if you want to perform any data transfer to, let's say you want to perform a data transfer from one storage account to another storage account, or from one service to other service, or even from on-premise using AZ copy, then you can choose the type of different services which again you can go for. For example, I've just selected the storage account, move from one, I've selected a scenario, I want to move the subscription, the storage account from one subscription to another subscription. So it has intelligently provided me the list of available options which I can opt for, and then I can choose the appropriate option based on my skill set and based on the recommendation or my comfort zone, and then I can go and perform the action basically. So let's say if I choose move to the new storage account, it remains same, but let's say let me choose something else. Yeah, if let's say you have choose to move to the different region instead of different subscription at all, then the option number of option has got reduced. I'll just tell you, it has got earlier four option, but now I have just got the 3 options. So this is what it is telling you from the basis of, basically it is providing you support if you want to migrate your data from one location to other location, either it is from one storage to other storage, moving a storage account to some different region, subscription, or copying data from on-premise to storage account or storage account to on-premise, something like that. So it is really helpful in that sense, basically for the developers. Let's move on to the event section. Here in the event section, like in one of our event-driven serverless programming demo, we have seen that we were able to capture the storage account events in the event hub, in the event grid topic, and we were also listening the event to the logic app. So similar thing, if you don't want to do it from that particular section, you can basically perform the same thing vice versa directly right from here from the storage account. If you want to create an Azure function targeting this particular storage account, which is kind of a blob trigger storage, blob trigger Azure function, which you have seen in one of our Azure function demonstration. So you can go ahead and choose and create an Azure function right here from the storage account, which will be type of blob storage trigger. Next, and one of the coolest feature I found here is they are trying to integrate the storage account or the storage explorer into the storage account. So if you are familiar about the storage account, you have the Windows version of the application for your storage explorer, which is a very solid, even though it's still one of my favorite tools, even though the storage explorer is integrated here in the portal, but it's not too helpful. The Windows application is much more helpful. That's my personal experience. So you can anytime you can search for the storage explorer, you'll get the Windows exe, which you can run on your machine and run the storage explorer as a Windows application, which you can see upload and download of blob containers, files, queues, tables, and all those things basically. So here I can go ahead and create a new container. Again, you can create a container of any type. Let's say create a demo data. So I can create a container like this, and here again you can specify the type of container. Default is private, no anonymous access. It means the person or the caller who has the access key, they would be able to retrieve the data or upload the data basically to the storage account container. X is the blob access read only for the anonymous blob read only access, which is a specific access to specific blob as a read only access. And the other one is you grant the access to the read-only access or anonymous access to the entire container, which is highly not recommended. But let's consider a scenario wherein you have this static file storage. Then you can go ahead and sorry, if you have this static website which you are hosting it here in the storage account, then that could be an option wherein I can go for the anonymous access type of storage container. Now, in my recent implementation with this storage account, I've stored the email templates into the and some of the CSS and HTML files into the storage account, and I make it as previously I make it to the private, and I often found that the CSS and HTML was not rendering out as it was expected because of that particular reason. So if you're storing such data on the storage account, you need to make sure that you are intending to store it as a public or a private. If it is stored as a private, you won't be able to access it without having access key. So do remember that. Once a storage container is created, you can go ahead and you would have the access to, as I said, this is not a good tool. You would have access to upload the files. You can directly go ahead and upload any file. For example, if I upload one of the Visual Studio icon here, it should be able to upload it right away from here, and it's very easy and quickly. Though it was smaller file, but it works well as well, depending upon the bandwidth you have on your internet. Next, let's move on to the storage account keys. You got two pair of keys. So one, you got the key 1, key 2, which you can see here, key 1, key 2. This is your access key for your storage account, primary and secondary as well. So why do we got two pair of key for each and every services in Azure? So the reason for getting the two different keys in storage account or any other service in Azure is, let's say if you are storing the information onto this such a sensitive information onto the key vault, and if you want to perform the data or the key rotation policies in your application, so without affecting basically or changing or affecting your application, existing application, uh, you can and without regenerating the keys, what you can do is you can rotate the key from primary to secondary, and then you can work out your implementation without having any impact to your application which is being used for this kind of services as an storage account. Next, we have the connection string, which again is just a combination of your name of storage account, and it has the storage key. If you just look at it carefully, it also contains the same storage key. Geo-replication, as we have already discussed, this is the dashboard page which will give you, if you have chosen the storage account kind as in replication kind as in geo-replication, then this will show you where exactly in which region your data has been replicated from primary to secondary in synchronous and asynchronous mode. Currently, I've just chosen the LRAs for this demo, but if you choose the GRS, then you get the view here that your data is moving in a synchronous on a primary location and asynchronous fashion on the secondary location, so you get full idea about that. Again, you have some more configuration which we have already discussed that while creating the story account. SAS key is another feature wherein you create a small access key for a small duration of time, because so the access key which is there on the access key sections, those are the permanent access keys, so you should not be sharing that kind of access key to let's say to anyone outside even your program. So it is highly recommend that you use the access key. So what is the difference between the access key and the shared access key? uh, so shared access key, you have an option to define which type of service you want to target for that particular access key. For example, I can create a shared access key with a blob storage access, and even the blob in the blob storage, I can define I need a I want to allow read permission, write permission, delete permission, or any what type of permission I want to specify. You have full freedom to choose. So let's say if you want to give a read access permission to someone, then it is recommended that you create a shared access key right from here and give a read permission to your shared access key, and somebody is going to access your data for the specific container using that particular shared access key. Whereas if you compare to the access key which has got full access to your entire storage account regardless of any container, so it is a kind of exposing everything versus exposing less. So it depends what do you want to choose. So you need to be very good careful. So it is highly recommended that you use the shared access key as much as possible. I hope you get the idea. Next thing is about the firewall and the virtual network. So like while we creating this storage account, we have already explained that how you can limit your storage account to be accessed from any specific virtual network or set of IP addresses. So I can specify the virtual network right from here or any specific IP address range. So the case in which way I was talking about the logic app, in that particular case you can specify the logic app IP address range here, and then you would be able to access the storage account even from the logic app, but you need to make sure those IP address range are not getting changed because it is managed by Microsoft, so it can be changed. That we will discuss it later if you want to. Please let me know in the comments if you need to discuss this particular topic. Next is the, I'll just cancel it out. Next is the private endpoint connections. So if you have a requirement wherein you want to specify a private connection between your storage account to some other storage account in the other region or any other private network, then you can specify the private endpoint. We can discuss the same thing if you would like to. For this demo, we are going to just discuss about some of the basic things about the storage account just to get you an idea. Let's move on to the another cool feature of the storage account. As I mentioned that you can deploy a static website to the storage account, which is again a cool feature. So here is that you create a container, put all your static data of your website, basically all your deployment content of your static website into a container, enable this particular website, give it a name of your website startup URL, and there you go. you use the name of your storage account, https, the name of your storage account, / name of your page, and you should be able to access your storage account right away. You don't need to buy any app service, Azure function, or any of these kind of a PaaS service basically, or you don't need any on-premise service. The storage account is really cool feature in such cases. Again, you have the property section where it is specified about all type of your different services. Again, the of your storage account, such as blob service, file service, queue, and the table storage type. Here is the blob container service. If you want to specify a custom domain or the DNS entry for your storage account, you can go ahead and link SSL certificate, specify or map a custom domain to your storage account right from here, and then you'll be able to use your choice of naming convention to your storage account as well. Let me tell you something about the file storage. File storage basically helps you to basically set the SMBP protocol which you have in your Windows application. Yeah, so let's say if you want to migrate your on-premise data which is there in the Windows, from there to the Azure storage, then file storage is an option, as I've already described in the video, in the graphical representation. But here you can say, okay, this is my SMBP SMB file protocol, and I want to specify, let's say, storage, whatever it is. So let's say I call and give it a space. You can specify number of any number of GBs. I believe it has limit, but yes, you can specify here. And then once you have the storage account limit created, what you can do is you can connect to the storage account with the help of the PowerShell command. So let's say you want to map the file share as in drive later on your Windows application. Run this command, copy this command, run it on your PowerShell on your Windows machine. Then you will have the additional drive which is specified or the chosen with this particular drive later. Yep. So this is a really again cool feature. This is for Windows, but if you want, I can go ahead and perform the similar operation here in the Mac and the Linux as well. So it is not limited only for Windows. That's it about the storage account. Though you have the other services as well, queues, table, but those are fairly easy to understand and simple. If you want me to explain any specific scenario about the queues and this table or any file or the blob storage, please do let me know in the comment section. I'll try to provide you a quick short video for that. I hope you like the description and the video. Let me know if you have any queries or questions in the comment sections, and give it a thumbs up if you like it. Thanks for watching it. Bye for now.